Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Death by Adaptation podcast, a bi-weekly book club where we choose one classic book and compare and contrast it against its cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolò, Grasso, and I'm joined as always by the great Ewan Gleadow. How are you doing, Ewan, and what are you drinking today?
What I'm drinking today is a courtesy of the Brudnell Club in Leeds. So, Nath Brudnell, if you're listening to this, thank you. I'm very sorry, but I was a bit drunk and stole two of your cups. It says on the front, please don't take me home or put me in the bin. I genuinely, I didn't mean to, but I've got a denim jacket where the pocket is big enough to hold an entire pint glass, so I just popped it in there for safekeeping at a gig. Forgot, you can't see the air quotes, but forgot, because I like little bits of memorabilia. I regret not stealing anything from the lead mill in Sheffield, so I thought I'd do right by myself. And now I've got a lovely drinking cup, because I genuinely never used to have a cup before this, and I would just drink water out of a 2-litre bottle, like a Philistine, which was really awkward in work conference meetings when they just see me start chugging out of a 2-litre bottle.
Yeah.
But, you know, doing good aside from that. My UK tour has come to an end, and I feel as tired as I was before it, but that's probably something to do with traveling in the middle of a train strike, which is, you know,
the best time to travel.
The best time to travel, because I ended up getting refunds on first class tickets, which is what we love to see. Nice and comfy, free bacon sandwich and free money. Well, not free, because I had to go fucking Manchester, but, you know, the more you know. How are you doing? How is our guest?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm very happy. Happy because we have once again on this podcast, after it was supposed to be here for the Die Hard episode, but sadly things didn't come to. I don't even remember why we couldn't make it. It was just a weird time beginning of the year for everyone. But now finally he's back. The one, the only Jakub Flasz, the founder of the Anchor Gems podcast. How are you doing, man?
You smell that? Do you smell that? It's podcasting, son. I love the smell of podcasting in the evening. That's how I'm doing.
Getting high on the podcasting.
I'm happy to be here, boys.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you. How are you doing? How's everything? How's life? We've missed you.
Oh, you know, just working, parenting, podcasting. That's pretty much the and writing a little bit. Just writing a little bit. So there's a W in there.
Yep,
but you know.
Yes.
Thought about that as soon as I said it. Yeah.
Fashion film blog is back. It's more active now. It's super good. I'm subscribed to the sweet WordPress emails,
so you know,
don't miss one.
Yeah, so I'm trying to kind of hone the craft so the AI won't replace me.
It's all about fighting ChatGPT now.
It is, yeah.
Prove we're better than it.
Just embrace it, lads. Embrace it.
Situation.
No, I'm not embracing any of this. Like I'm happy ChatGPT is gonna just remove content from the internet, and all we'll be left with is people with actual voices. Maybe this is my moment, and someone's going to actually tune in to read my 1,500 word diatribes about would Travis Bickle vote for Trump. And the answer is yes.
I read the 65 review, and that put me off of ever seeing it. So thank you for that.
That's good. I mean, although I gave it 3 out of 5 because the father-daughter drama kind of just made it bearable. But just Jesus Christ, this movie. I mean, if it was like longer, any longer than like 93 minutes, it would be just like, no, I'm out.
Yeah, I saw the trailer of it in front of John Wick. I was like, yeah. I've read Jakub's review. You're not convincing me this is good, or like at least worth it for the cinema.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, like someone left the cinema. I was just like, you know, like I don't blame you, but you know, like I'm sticking this out.
But speaking of movies set in the jungle, not with dinosaurs though. Today we're here.
Marlon Brando.
Well, that's a different type of dinosaur. You're right. You're correct. But last time, the good Randy Burrows was on the pod to talk about Anne of Green Gables. You know, something a bit lighter, a bit of a detour. We deserve nice books sometimes, just about kind people, just wholesome, hopeful. Usually they're the ones where Ewan isn't present. Just this is too light for me.
Yeah, sorry.
It just coincidentally comes in. It was very funny to me. I was like, man, whenever Ewan is like, yeah, let's do this drug book and this other drug book and this addiction story and this crime world.
To be fair,
it's a recurring theme.
Have like an optimistic book. I just so happened to be out drinking that day. I remember because the day you were recording it, I was at a gig in Manchester, And I'd had quite a lot of drink. It was a very good night. I got some sweat sprayed on me by the singer. What
Oh,
a treat!
you
Oh,
need like an umbrella to protect
oh
you.
no, you got to lap it up. There's no water in that crowd.
Well,
You gotta take the nourishment where you can get it. Thank
if
you,
it
Brett.
had been a Rammstein concert, this possibly wouldn't
Ah,
have been sweat.
Ooh,
Just saying.
gotta relieve yourself, in the heat of the moment. Just no time to take a break.
I had the same experience at the sit down gig I went to with Bob Dylan. Yeah, you just gotta when the piss comes, you gotta piss.
Well,
Jesus.
Like Heart of Darkness.
Yes, today we're going on in a much darker direction, back on our regular schedule, you could say, of,
Back.
of classic grim literature in some ways. Before we begin, as always, are you listening to us on Spotify, Apple Pod, Google Pod? Maybe you're watching this in video format on YouTube. Subscribe, follow us, leave a like, 5 stars. We hope you enjoyed this episode and we hope to have you back again in the future for more recordings. But now, without further ado, let's talk about Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness and Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now.
Saigon. Shit. I'm still only in Saigon. Every time I think I'm gonna wake up back in the jungle. When I was home after my first tour, it was worse. I'd wake up and there'd be nothing. I hardly said a word to my wife until I said yes to a divorce. When I was here, I wanted to be there. When I was there, all I could think of was getting back into the jungle. I'm here a week now, waiting for a mission. Getting softer. Every minute I stay in this room, I get weaker. And every minute Charlie squats in the bush, he gets stronger. Each time I looked around, the walls moved in a little tighter.
Heart of Darkness is an 1899 book written by Joseph Conrad. It tells the story of Charles Marlowe, who is tasked by an ivory company to go in the heart of the African continent to find Kurtz, a man who was working for the company who's apparently been lost to madness and to the African heat. Jakub, what are your thoughts with Heart of Darkness? And what's your
oh,
history with it? I don't think this was your first time reading it. I don't think
no,
it was for either one of us. So, what was it like reading it the first time? How was it like revisiting it for this pod? Tell me.
I've read it like a number of times actually.
Oh.
Um, and it's weird because I don't really like it. So, but I read it first like when I was I don't know 16 years old, something like this, because it was like an extracurricular reading at school. So I was just like,
Mm.
yeah, let's um, just pack this in because we were doing Lord's Gym at school, I think at the time, and I think it was just like, yeah, let's just add another one because like I hate my life a little bit more because I really don't jive with Joseph Conrad's writing. And by the way, just shout out to the Polish team because like the guy was he's one of the finest voices in English literature who actually had to learn English. So for me, he like even though I really hate reading his stuff, I kind of see him as a kind of like a personal hero in a way because it's just like you don't have to be like a native speaker to actually make it to be sort of appreciated. So maybe I do have a shot. So like
Yeah.
flashonfilm.com is where you want to go. So-
It's the Joseph Conrad of the 21st century, that
yeah, because
blog.
like my stuff, I hope it reads much better than Heart of Darkness, which is kind of just like I think my like every time I read it, it kind of just feels like you're just reading, like it feels like you're walking through like a tarry swamp, you know.
Mm.
And I think I remember that this is for like on purpose. Like the experience of reading this book is like trying to walk through a jungle, right? But it's not helping. And then I read it again when I was, I think, in my 20s after reading Stephen King's On Writing. I think he mentions this as one of his favorite books of all time or whatever. So I'm like, I need to give it
Yes.
another shot, and it still didn't help me, right? So I read it the third time, and I mean, for this show, I read just half of it and decided, like, I just need to listen to it instead. I think it will be easier. So I was just driving to and from work because I have like an hour commute each way in the car. So I was just listening to it, which is a phenomenal experience. By the way, when you like stop at a red light and with your like window rolled down, and then this guy with this sort of voice just says how describes a black guy being beaten, and I'm just like, and then there's these people giving you looks, and I'm just thinking I'm gonna roll my windows up and like marinate in my own sort of racist book in here. It's just I don't know.
Just writing down your license plates, like this guy,
I was just like, you don't understand. This is a work of historical fiction. Like you don't get it, but So like my history of this is a little bit patchy. So I appreciate this book more than I like it, and I don't really like it. so I'll, like in terms of initial impressions, like I feel like it's not a book for me. Although it sent me again into this rabbit hole of like reading up on Belgian colonial period. And actually, like a few years back, I remember I reviewed for Clapper this documentary called African Apocalypse, where these guys were retracing, um, I think this French dudes, like some general who went mad, who may have been potentially like some kind of a inspiration for Kurtz, who actually went and started just genocidally murdering tribes somewhere up the river Congo. And they went and investigated this, and then just looked up the history of French and Belgian colonialism, and it's nuts, So yeah, so I appreciate it sent me on this rabbit hole of investigating history that's not really taught in schools very well, but the experience of reading this book is like I wouldn't really wish it on my worst enemy. so I'll put it that way. Like I know it's important for and it's like the most important books in written in English language by a Polish guy, by the way. So, but it ain't for me, Chief. So.
Very fair, very, very, very fair. How about you, Ewan? I believe this wasn't the first time for you as well, right?
No, this was
familiar.
This was the first book I read in 2020 when there was a whole lockdown on for that that virus problem, and that was when I got back into reading. And then months down the line we started this podcast. So it's Heart of Darkness's fault that we're here right now talking about it. Yeah, but I mean, the first time I read it, was like, oh, that's a very it's a very important text. Like Jakub touched on there, it's like it's very integral. It's a very historic book. And on the second reading, I couldn't give a shit. Yeah, it's fine. It's all right.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's whatever. I feel like a lot
3
of
3 out of 5.
Yeah, it is a 3 out of 5. Joseph Conrad's sort of, I mean, like, it's a very important text, yes, granted, but it does stem from the few moments that people remember: the horror, etc., the steamboat breaking down. The message and the theme is stronger than the writing itself, which, like Jakub said, is like walking through a swamp, and intentional or not, when you get into the flow of it and you're really enjoying it, and it's the bit where it's building up to who Kurtz was, and he's asking around the camp, it's like, who is he, what does he do, and everybody shies away from it, and then it just throws another stumbling block in place, and it's like, right, well, back out we go. And I get it, it's like from the perspective of a guy telling a story to people that are probably quite bored of listening to him. I mean, it's fine, it's all right. Yeah, it's written in the style you would expect of the turn of the 18th to 19th century. Fucking hell, century.
It would be the turn of the 20th century, no?
Yeah, that's the one I meant. Yeah, you can tell maths is my strong suit, or history either. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's an obviously dated text, which is great. I do like a good oldie. But this one, just regardless of the time it was written, is going to be a very jilted piece, a very janky piece. And it's a shame as well, because the sort of the meat and potatoes of it is a really, really strong story. Obviously, a lot of parallels between, Africa and London in the book, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. It's just a shame it was written by a man that was writing like a tit. Because I bought Nostromo. I bought a really nice hardback of it like a couple months ago, and rereading Heart of Darkness made me realize I've made a mistake in buying that very nice hardback. I don't think I'll power through it anytime soon, but it's there on the shelf somewhere. It's like a really nice, like not a special edition, but like the ones that they sell in Waterstones, like the fancy ones. It's like, oh, I'll treat myself.
Like a Penguin Classic, or
like a Penguin Classic, but like the black and white special editions. I'll get the name.
And all?
It might be. What was
if someone's doing well, it probably cost like $19.99.
I think this one was, to be fair, I had Waterstone's discount where it was like I
Ah.
had money on my card. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to splash out on a hardback of a book I've never read. I'm not
At
made of money.
Waterstones of all places as well. It's like a 10% markup already over Amazon.
Waterstones it's pretty feral these days. What was it?
But you
I'm
gotta
gonna
go and
find
buy
it.
books at Waterstones if you want them to actually survive, because like you have to shop, you have to spend money, because
Support the
otherwise
libraries, not
support support your local libraries, support your local bookshops,
It was
buy physical media, buy local, shop local, because shop in your local grocery store, because you're like maybe the tomato is a pound more expensive, but it sponsors a little girl's dancing classes.
I live in the middle of fucking nowhere. We don't have anything like that. We just have chains. The
It's
closest
just
coffee
Aldi.
shop to me is at Greg's, or if I'm feeling a bit adventurous, I can go to the petrol station, which has a Bean Company coffee machine.
Fantastic.
It was an Everyman's Library Classic Edition.
Cool.
I've never heard of those.
I will be putting on eBay once calling is ended. If anybody would like it for $5.99.
It's mint condition.
Can I
It
add
is.
a little corollary to what you're just saying, just
Yeah.
quickly?
Sure
I've
thing.
discovered that having this guy, because I also tried to read Secret Agent, and that's
Yeah.
also like, I mean, I know it's just like, oh, like Heart of Darkness is written like you're supposed to walk through a swamp. Like all of this stuff is written like you're walking through a swamp. So, but it works when it's read to you in an audiobook form, especially when it's read by an old man. It works because it's kind of like an old guy telling you a story, and the story is just really freaky and creepy. Because especially when it's read in this sort of like monotone voice, like there's this guy smoking a pipe and talking about these black men being tortured, and and then it's just, and you just like, I don't know, it just puts you in this sort of hypnosis of like in this phantasmagoria. It's ridiculous. It works like that. But if you actually have to just use your own eyes to do this, do it yourself, hombre.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I have to second everything that you both said. The first time I read it, I think it was in 2020 or like early 2021, but I had a copy of it for years. I remember going to my local bookshop, and they were having a full discount day, and I remember seeing they had like a 2-for-1 type of deal on some of those books. I don't remember what the other book was, but they had this collection of 3 stories by Conrad, and it was Heart of Darkness, The Typhoon. I don't remember the third one. I was trying to look at my library, but it's actually in another room. This location of the book, so I don't remember the other third stories.
Probably Lord Jim or Nostromo. One of the two.
Yeah.
I don't think it was Nostromo. I would remember that. Maybe The Inheritors. Who knows?
Maybe.
Some of the titles are different in Italian.
It's going to be a
Anyway.
left of field one. It's going to be like The Rover or something. It's going to be something weird towards the end of his career.
Oh,
It's
shit,
gonna
it might
be a
actually
name
be
of-
The Rover, actually.
It's going to be a name of the ship anyway.
That's how he
'Cause
loved
he was very fond of ships.
Really, yeah.
There are recurring themes in his bibliography for sure.
Yeah.
But I absolutely loathed the book the first time I read it. It was so hard to get into it. In Italian, may I say as well. It's not like it was already in the English language. It was all in my native language. It was a struggle to get through it. But for this podcast, that's one of the things that I really try to do in general. I do it for movies. I try to do it for books as well, as long as they're in English or a language I speak. I try to read them in the original format. So I was like, this is the time. This is the day to actually read it in English. And like you, Jakub, it took me one chapter to say, nope,
No,
audiobook it is. I just got myself a nice subscription to Storytel.
High
It's
five.
beautiful. 2.75 hours long, listened at like 1.5 speed, something like that. I was like, perfect. Just walking around doing shit. Excellent.
2.75 hours. Like I found one that was 4 hours long. It was like probably read by an old guy. Like it was great.
Oh, I speed it up. I'm all about speeding things up. I
Oh,
cannot
Love
focus on.
this Netflix.
Savor it.
fiction. Oh,
Yeah.
The man was wearing white, and he just looked resplendent in this sea of brown and mud, and you just as I'm taking a right turn, or just overtaking on the M40, like ding ding, dickhead, look in the mirrors.
the pacing of it, I imagine the audiobook was a lot better because I was stuck with paper. And it's kind of ironic when you've got stuff like I strode rapidly with clenched fists, and then it takes another paragraph to get to his destination. It's like it's just little things like that. Really
I kept just drifting away out of this. Like I'll just like read and I'll just start thinking about anything else.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm still on the same page. Like what's happening?
It's been like
Like,
half an hour.
it's been half an hour and I'm just like, and people are just like, shut off or get off the pot. And I'm just, I'm like, okay, fine. And people are wondering, like, because I'm like at work, just like quickly just stepping out to the loo and then just like occupying myself for 5 minutes, and it's like 30 minutes because I started daydreaming while trying to read Heart of Darkness, and people think I am constipated at work.
Just
Very
stood in a
stimulating
cubicle,
book.
not even sat, just stood in a cubicle, clenched fist, just seething at how boring it can get.
I mean, this would have been a different sort of level. Just like go and read a book while having a piss. Just hold the book.
No, I could probably do that. I mean, I would have done it for Hearts of Darkness, but I probably would have drifted off.
Just fell into loo. Oh no, it's ruined. Oh well, I guess I'm not reading this anymore.
Such a tragedy. What am I gonna do now? Anyway, Nicolò,
It's a shame. It's an absolute shame because I agree with what you said, Ewan. The fact that and you as well, Jakub. Like there are important themes in here. It is definitely an historically relevant book to this day, influential for multiple reasons, but it's a struggle. It's a proper struggle to get through it. And listening to it in audio format kind of improved things. I previously had it on Goodreads at 2 stars, and now it's 3 stars. But even then, like it was interesting reading some of the other reviews compared to other classics that we've talked about, even going back to like Charles Dickens and the like from Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, like those books from the 19th century and the end of that period. Like this one is still controversial, not only for its content, because of course we'll get into that, that's a bit controversial again, but primarily for the way it's written, for the way it's structured. It's dull. It's just a little bit dull. I think that's something that I've kind of figured out. i like I like poetic cinema. I like getting lost in the beauty of the image and all that. Oh no, dialogue's amazing. It's beautiful. It's perfect. I cannot read poetic books or
It's not
books
poetic
that,
though.
or just
It's
very richly worded and layered phrases where it's like, oh, there's so much context and meaning to each sentence, and it's so carefully planned. It's very heavy. There are books that I've read like that are still enjoyable. This one is very heavy,
like
and I've
19th
noticed.
century is not for you then, because they're all like that.
I've-
They
well,
were very fond of just 3 paragraphs on what the field looked like.
well, to be fair, I didn't
Can you
like
just
Dickens. That's true.
please?
I did not like Dickens. I did like Bronte sisters. Bronte sisters are cool in my book. Jane Austen is cool in my book, but those are also more
Because they
populist
were written
novels.
by women, so they had other things they needed to do. So we're just like, let's quickly write this up. So coming.
It's also not a populist novel, which I think it's also key to Art of Darkness. Like this is made by a man who had a lot of things to say about the time that he was living in, the
a
world
lot
that
of
he
and a lot of time on
experienced,
his hands.
and a lot of time was just so much time on his hands. Speaking of time,
So
this is a
bad.
novel that sprawls, months on this very, very deep journey through the African continent. As we've mentioned, Mr. Marlowe here sees the worst in humanity, the worst in people. And one of the key themes, one of the key elements of this that kind of will translate over to the Francis Ford Coppola movie are the elements of imperialism and just the banality of evil. Like you mentioned it, Jakub, briefly, but the fact that amongst the various things that he witnesses, there's a lot of torture of indigenous people and Africans by the hands of is Belgians and Dutch,
Yes,
like the
Belgians.
Belgians.
That was a Belgian colony, like that. One of the last places on Earth that hasn't been claimed by anyone because everyone who tried got either murdered by the natives, or people would decide like, you know what, it's too difficult. Let's just go and explore different parts of the map. It was like, like, oh, this is too high level area. Let's go elsewhere. Yeah.
Pretty much, and it's this is one of those things I'm interested actually in hearing from you, because again, as I mentioned previously, a lot of people have problems with the portrayal of Africans in this book.
It's not a
And
lot of people, just like few academics. Most people are kind of
true.
like okay with it. It's just
But, I like to address those things. It's always good. It's always good to put it out there. But I do definitely think that it's interesting. You were even saying it, Jakub, in the way that all of the way the book is narrated and told through first person, as Marlowe is older and aged and jaded even about the state of the world, kind of recounting what he lived through when he was a bit younger through this life-changing experience. You are witnessing the world through his eyes. So
Mhm.
even all of the words that he uses to describe these people, and even some of the racial slurs, which sadly were just not to excuse it, but it was a product of its time as well. But I don't see it primarily as Conrad was necessarily a racist piece of shit. But that's definitely part of the character, at least how he viewed the world. How do you feel about that? And also just this whole portrayal of Africa as this dangerous, uncivilized continent that the western man has to change. This theme of imperialism, in this case it was the ivory merchants that started to gain more and more power, destroying all tribes and murdering dozens of animals just to get pelts and get some luxury items to sell back in ye old England and Belgium and the Netherlands and so on. What do you think, Jakub?
Oh, I was wondering who are you going to call to the front of the class?
Tension. It's like,
No,
who's losing focus right now?
by the way, just just to quickly put in perspective the opening gambit as well for all of us. Like for anyone who hasn't read the book, this book is like 120 pages long, and we're making it look like this is like 1200 or 1200 pages, sort of like big sort of Bible epic. No,
Oh, it's
no,
a novella. I think
it
it
has three
qualifies as a novella,
chapters.
right?
It has three
Yeah.
chapters. Okay, and this is like I can't find proof, but I thought either I heard or read an interview with Stephen King who actually referred to this as the longest novella ever written, and I can't find proof to corroborate this. So I'm just doing what politicians do. I'm just going to assume now that this is now on the record and this is what's happened, but I don't have proof, so don't quote me on that. Anyway.
Sounds like a Stephen King thing to say.
Yeah, it does sound like a Stephen King thing to say, but I can't find proof to corroborate that. It's just like it lives in my memory and I don't know how. But anyway, um, on the sort of colonialism theory, I think the thing and the controversy as well, like it kind of needs to be addressed because I think a lot of critics of the book. I mean, I'm not a fan of the book for just how difficult it is to read, but like the
Mm.
content wise, I find it just immensely fascinating, both as a product of because any book written back in time, even if it's fictitious or not, is some kind of a time capsule for us, right? So because you kind of get to interrogate the perspective of the time, maybe the milieu, the zeitgeist of the time. You get to kind of interact with people from the past a little bit, and I think people who are critical of Joseph Conrad and actually actively calling him a racist. I mean, this has been debunked and then
Hmm.
has been actually criticized back as saying these people are conflating the character and the author because
Yes.
nowadays, especially nowadays, it's almost frowned upon if writers assume a different perspective than their own. Like it
Hmm.
used to be just natural that, say, a man would write a book from the perspective of a woman and no one would bat an eye. And the other way around. Like a woman would write a book and the main character would be a man and she would inhabit his headspace and then she would write from his perspective and it would work. Right. But nowadays it's kind of just like, no, you stick with your own. Okay. so so by this token, I think some people will make an assumption that if he's describing certain things in a very I don't want to say nonchalant, but in a very sort of detached, um,
Very cold.
very cold manner, like
Hmm.
because there's I think this is where this thing kind of comes to a head where you hear this, and I heard because I listened to the book this time. You hear these descriptions or you read this very detached, dehumanized description of absolute utter violence, of racist violence, right? Then you may actually make an assumption: is the author detached as well? Does he not care? I mean, maybe he cares because, like, if you actually pull back and you see, like, he's disgusted by it, but he's equally like you have to remember that you're reading a book from the turn of the century, the fin de siècle. People were kind of sort of checked out with humanity at the time as well. So I think you kind of have to just filter this through that perspective and see this. Okay, well, this guy's critical of what he's seeing. He's just completely, he's lost his faith in humanity. So what do you want him to do, right? Do you want him to go and just charge at these people and say like, no, you stop doing that? Like he's ready to give up. He's ready to slit his own wrists if you gave him a razor, as far as I'm concerned. So, but then in doing so, he kind of through the eyes of Christopher Marlowe, whom you could imagine that Joseph Conrad own experiences are also kind of embedded in there. So this is something that he had seen, he had witnessed, and he just thought to himself, people have been doing this to other people, because he wasn't a captain of a steamboat in there. Like he went to the Congo. He was hired by this English company, just traveling up and down the river, and he witnessed this, and then he actually there are these little nuggets, and it's difficult to actually just pay attention, because it's difficult to pay attention to the book, but he actually makes these comments of like, he compares like English colonialism almost, and he sees it as positively benign in comparison, right? And because what Belgians were doing in the Congo, it makes the Nazis look tame, Okay, it's ridiculous, right? What happened in Africa in there, because like they were just like he says, like this is conquest. This is not. He almost said this is not colonialism, where they were just like establishing an industry or something like this. Even though the colonialism, as he sees being benign, it's still quite cruel, right? But then he sees like, so if you imagine in comparison, if he sees this what's happening as cruel, and then it's nuts, right? So I would say it kind of just opens this perspective towards a world that is like some people kind of like not to be mentioned. So and then it kind of just comes back to the fact, like Belgians didn't have any colonies, and they really thought they really needed to be in this game, so they did it at all costs. And then he has this sort of line in the book saying like, well, if like what, like you're not powerful if you think you're powerful just because your adversary is weak, you're not really powerful. This is what you're doing is just reckless conquest. So he looks at these people with disdain. He detests these Belgian colonials, and he detests what they're doing, because he sees like, this is not right. Like, you're not treating these people right. Like, what are you people doing?
You're not treating these people as people.
Yeah, exactly. Like just what are you people up to? Like he would be essentially the equivalent of, like, I don't know, if he was driving a truck into Auschwitz, right? And he was just like, what is happening? But then you can, okay, well, feel free to criticize. And it's like, why is he driving a truck in there? Why is he not deciding, like, you know what, I'm going to stop now. Like, I'm going to go home, right? Well, fair enough. You open, I think you'd be within your rights to criticize this, but like, it is what it is.
Right? He's on a mission. He's going to have a payout.
Yeah, suppose like he went back and told the tale, but then I suppose people, I don't know, I wouldn't go and argue with people who just say like, well, why didn't he, do something about it? Well, not everyone's a hero. If you think you'd be a hero, if you lived in 1942 and occupied Poland, you'd be a hero, like, think again, you probably wouldn't be a hero. Yeah, so
hindsight is 2020.
It's the equivalent as well as sort of like fly on the wall documentarians today. Are they going to get leveled the same criticism for observing and not getting involved
and reporting? Why are you not shooting at these people you're interviewing? Well,
many are.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are, but like most people are not brave enough to do that. They're brave enough to actually go up to them and speak to these people. Like, I don't know if you've seen The Look of Silence or The Act of Killing, for instance. Like, where you have documentarians actually going up close and personal to mass murderers, and asking them really uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes real courage to do that. And then it's like, what else do you want to do?
Sometimes it's more important as well. I mean, you think of sort of war reporters like Marie Colvin, who observed and then reported and did not involve themselves. They are not personally neutral, but in that period, in that context, they have to be to get to the root of the story, to inform people. And I'm not saying Heart of Darkness is like the best informative piece out there, but it certainly highlights a lot of that horror, and it does it articulately, and it does it obviously long-windedly, like we said, it's only 100 odd pages, but
It's
it
almost
feels like
on
a
purpose to
fucking
just let you
nightmare.
stew in this.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's the gamble he takes, where it's like, okay, make it long-winded, make it really stick in the mind that this is excruciating, it's painful for everybody involved. The downside of that is that it's not particularly interesting in spots, but when it does hit on those moments of the torture of imperialism, by the way, I'm very glad that you left the Englishman last to talk about imperialism. But
Totally on purpose.
yeah, sorry about that, lads. It won't happen again. But a lot of the latter stages of the book, when you actually find that Kurtz has gone, a bit doolally, are the sort of consequences of it. I don't think you need to have a straightforward, oh, this is bad because obviously it's bad. Of course it's bad. Anybody that's read it and has cognitive abilities can understand that is bad. Of course it's bad. You don't need to have it handheld and sort of observe that the writer thinks it's bad, therefore you should think it's bad. So I think in hindsight,
could you imagine someone reads this and you're like, these Belgians were awesome people.
It's like finishing the Hunger Games and thinking,
It's
well,
more
I
about the
just
person.
I just don't know what to feel about this one, lads. I think, I think a lot of the stuff I've read this year, it's very lacking in that hand holding, and I appreciate that more than something that's sort of representing what the author feels. I mean, Trainspotting is a decent example where it's like it's obviously in line with a thought of, well, aren't drugs bad? But it does well to sort of alleviate that and look at
Just say no.
Side of it.
You know?
Yeah, Reagan had it right, probably.
A little Thatcher.
Yeah, but as far as the sort of, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of the comparison between Africa and London. He saw no difference between the civilized and the so-called savages, where it was sort of there was no difference. There kind of still isn't, because
that's critique, right? Is it not?
Yes, of course it's a critique. It's a thematic critique, and it's just not blatantly in everyone's faces because he's actually showing the torture, the horror, the inconvenience of it, I suppose. The real, genuine drama comes from not the perspective that he wants to represent, but the perspective that he shows. And I don't think you need a writer to really say it. Like it's the equivalent of adding an asterisk at the end and putting in a footnote. By the way, I don't think this is right. It's the exact equivalent.
I mean, maybe this is the modern reader just requires the sort of like, well, it has to be re-spelled out for you. Like there have to be violence in the background, and so like, and it has to start with like racism bad, okay? Just like I think we get it.
It's the equivalent of the "do not try this at home" warning before the Jackass movie starts.
Contents may be hot.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Please do not broadcast this on MTV before 10 p.m., lads. Thank you. But no, it's obviously based on his experiences. Just because it's based on his experiences doesn't mean it has to be based on his opinion as well. There's a lot to be said for the brevity of it, which is very short, very quick.
The brevity is inexistent. It is short. It's not. The brevity is not a right word.
I was trying to think of the right word. It was it's kind of the discipline that he shows in not presenting it as, oh my god, isn't it terrible? Isn't it awful? It's just a matter of fact. It happened, and it happened for a horribly long time. I imagine that people at the time were also equally as horrified, but now people are horrified that, oh my god, you can't write that word down. You can't not say it's a bad thing. It's I'm not defending it as a text because it is a really boring read sometimes, but as far as it succeeds in what it wants to do. It succeeds in critiquing a horrible, horrible part of history, which is the aim of it, I suppose. At the end of it, it is the aim of it.
Partially, I suppose. Partially, at least, right?
Yeah,
I think he's going a bit further and just interrogating almost the humanity of it, as in like, what are we doing as a species? If we can let this thing happen, why are we even allowed to be here? Is there a god in here? Again, fin de siècle. Is the god is dead? Why are we allowing this to happen? Christ. Like this is the book. This is Heart of Darkness, the abridged version, Yeah.
Yes, but he didn't explicitly tell me that. So how am I meant to believe it?
Yes. And then he did use the N-word at least 7 times in it, so that he definitely is a racist. I mean, like, well, that was the language of the time, and he's and he's doing this so nonchalantly just to almost drive a point home that, you know what?
Yeah.
These people didn't care. Nobody did.
I didn't know how to bring this bit up because I used to listen to the audiobook, but in the book, because I'm old and I still read, every paragraph starts with a speech mark. Just little details like that, really nice. Every single part of it, like it is literally a bloke telling a story.
Because
Everything.
Marlowe is telling this to
Yeah.
someone in a room. Yeah.
Is he on a boat or is he in a room? Doesn't make much
Well, it's in a
difference.
cabin.
Yeah.
Somewhere,
on a,
yeah.
on some they're on a
On the
boat somewhere
script.
on like parked up somewhere on the Thames in London.
Yeah.
It's the best place to have a nice conversation with someone and hear
Oh.
stories of old.
Really not. Apparently, you're not allowed to drink Thames water.
But I'm not surprised.
Well, you can boil it. Bear Grylls used to boil water.
Oh, jeez. Probably not Thames water, I hope so, at least. That's a true challenge right there to survive. But even then, it was very interesting. I completely forgot, actually, that they were contemporaries. But at the same time of Conrad's writing, there was also another similarly experienced but also more romantic writer, which is Rudyard Kipling. So I say coupling. Rudyard Kipling, who most famously wrote the Jungle Book, but he was more of an adventure writer. You know, he kind of I would say glorified the British government and their colonial empire. But he definitely, you know, he was born in India. He wrote in the United Kingdom, and they were kind of rivals. I didn't even know about that, but yes, they were rivals writing at the same time, and they had very different goals. And Kipling was primarily to entertain and to show these different cultures from our own. But there is always this, you know, this different mindset, I would say, in the way that he approached his stories. That's a subject for another podcast if we were to do the Jungle Book and similar.
I mean, he was more pro-imperialist, as in like look at the good we're doing, spreading the
Yes.
word of Christ. Look at the redcoats in just shiny and bright. Don't mind the killing over here. Look at here. Look, just smell the tea.
The sugar coating is one way to to put it
It's just
for
that's good. It's just
what he
by the
was
way,
doing.
just like when Ewan is speaking, he's saying like, "Oh, Kurtz went doolally." It's just like a very nice sort of turn of phrase because I think this is a phrase invented by Rudyard Kipling, right?
It all comes together.
Is it not?
It's all swings and
Please tell me,
roundabouts.
to go doolally? This is from like Kipling's book? Please tell
I've
me.
never
Check it
read
out. Check it
Kipling,
out.
and I've never read him at all. But yeah, sure it is. Yeah, actually,
I
it
think I
was him.
did because I remember there is also actually very funnily enough there is Salgari, an Italian writer who's written primarily adventure books, and he was someone who basically read Kipling and Conrad and other writers from the time who actually saw some of these exotic locales, and he created fictional characters based on, you know, what he read and the pictures that he saw, which is very interesting to just how much, you know, other cultures are romanticized by Westerners. You know, we're talking about India, we're talking about China, we're talking about Africa, like all those places that felt so alien, especially in the era of the industrial revolution. You know, like things were become like all the entire world was getting smaller and smaller, and so there is still this appeal of, you know, oh my god, we went to Congo. Just this is so far away. This is still like uncharted territory. But once you get there, you know, it's this need to control everything. It shines through in Heart of Darkness, which is what something that I appreciate, and even all of the musings on evil and just people doing it and losing touch from reality and becoming desensitized to it, and it's just there, and it's not beautiful, it's not powerful, it's not cathartic, it's just
Mhm.
ugly in multiple facets. I Again, that's what's so frustrating about Heart of Darkness, because you're talking about it and we're talking about it. This is so interesting, but then the actual act of reading it is pain, which is a shame, I think. Did you find the quote, Jakub?
I did find. It turns out, I think Rudyard Kipling may not be accredited for invention of it, but it originates from the British Army slang from the time.
Oh, there you go. He's
Uh,
good pals.
so if like from like the British station somewhere in like in India as well. So it kind of just it fits. The sort of the region and the time of where Rudyard Kipling and others would be there, but I think it cannot be attributed to Rudyard Kipling. So like apologies to the listeners who actually think that I know something that I
Got
don't.
our hopes up.
No,
We were
it
ready to
would have
throw
been
him under the
poetic.
bus.
Would have been poetic, like just like, oh, just Conrad's describing a guy who went doolally, and it's just like, and then would have been perfect because they didn't really see eye to eye with Kipling on many
Close
things.
enough. Close enough. Still fun. Still fun. Almost fun. Almost connection. Um, but speaking of fun, we talked a lot about this book, which is very interesting thematically, but maybe not the most entertaining read. But thankfully, someone did read the book, and they thought, you know what, this can be something different.
This is
This
amazing.
this is amazing. I love it. There's so much richness here, and I'm so in love with it. I kind of want to make my own version of it. Unofficial adaptation, changing some things up, updating the setting to his modern times. This man was Francis Ford Coppola, who, after the height of Godfather Part 2, and the conversation, he was like, you know what? I'm at the top of the world, baby. I'm gonna make this war epic that's going to criticize an ongoing conflict that's slowly coming to an end. And I'm going to spend all the money in the world to make it, endangering the lives of cast and crew, endangering his own life and that of his family, almost losing his mind, shooting for months and months and months on end in the Philippines and Cambodia. And that finally, after almost a year, over a year of editing, together with good old Walter Murk, we got Apocalypse Now, premiered at Cannes, won the Palme d'Or, nominated at the Oscars, and it's now considered one of the greatest war films of all time. Ewan, what do you think? Is this actually one of the great war films of all time? Is it a good adaptation? Translating Heart of Darkness into the Vietnam War. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What's your history with this film, Apocalypse Now?
Yeah, it's all right. No,
3
3 out of 5.
stars.
yeah, it's fine. 3 stars. No, Apocalypse Now is genuinely one of my favorite movies ever. I absolutely,
Hey.
absolutely love it. I've seen it loads of times. I studied the Vietnam War when I was doing my GCSEs, which horrifyingly enough was 8 years ago now, which is
Getting up
scary.
there.
But I, thanks for that. 23
You
going on
youngsters
50.
in your GCSEs 8 years ago, Jesus.
So, yeah, I mean, I've watched it a lot of times, and then I've watched the documentary to go along with it, Heart of Darkness, Filmmakers Apocalypse. Both beautiful, beautiful films. As far as it goes, specifically in the adaptation of a text into the modern times, well, at least modern at the time, really, really successful, really, really powerful stuff. How much of it is drawn from Coppola himself, and how much of it is actually drawn from Heart of Darkness, I'm not too sure. The concept is there, like the fundamental narrative of a man seeking out another man
Mhm.
because they have gone either mad or are in power and can help, is there. Beyond that, though, it's a lot of scathing criticisms, a lot of huge explosives, it's a lot of contemporary at the time adaptations of weird moments in Vietnam history, like the Playboy helicopter and the sort of little bits and pieces that came through. And you can tell that the man has lost his mind because I mean I think I've seen all the versions of Heart of Darkness now, Apocalypse
All
Now
three
even.
of them, all impressive.
Yeah. Um, there are certain cuts that clearly show the man had lost the plot. There are certain that work very, very well. There are certain cuts, like the former mentioned there, that have that French bit in about the colonies, which is, from a historic standpoint, really impressive. From a narrative standpoint, very confusing. Um, but it's nice to see that he was trying to keep in line with sort of the actual history of the Vietnam War, the French and the removal of them, and then the American invasion in the 60s, and it's all there. It's all there. But crucially, so is Conrad's sort of vision, his image, and that sort of damnable process of nobody's better than the other in warfare. These are all sick people. They are all,
Hmm?
for one reason or another, killing each other, and it's quite stark and it's quite staggering. Um, there isn't as much sort of violence as I first remembered, though. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of brutal, bloody bits and pieces, but a lot of it is the spectacle. A lot of it, the helicopters flying over, as Robert Duvall talked about napalm in the morning. The bit where you actually pull up to Curtis Island. Is it Kurtz or Kuntz? Is it Kurtz? I don't know.
Kurtz.
Guys,
Kurtz.
do you want to bleep it?
Kurtz.
It's an explicit show.
I genuinely
Can
I'm not
upload
even,
it.
that wasn't even a bit. I actually forgot his name. So Colonel Brando. When you first go to the island, and it's
First is a safer.
Dennis Hopper. Do you want to take a moment just to process that one? When Dennis Hopper's on the island, he sort of leaps out. There's just so many little bits that piece together for me that also piece together in the book, but not as well. I think part of it for me is the kind of, the pursuit of self-worth, even where he's going on this massive adventure and at some point loses the original purpose of it. The original purpose was to find a man and sort of put him to rest. And then it inevitably turns into this sort of journey of self-discovery and whether or not it's actually worth it. The scene with Martin Sheen where he's drunk and he's slicing away at himself and screaming. It is madness. It's really just, I think I just like seeing people sort of break down in that way. Not in a sicko way, but in a kind of, I'm close. I'm getting
He
to
was
that
high
now.
as a kite when they were
Yeah.
shooting it, right? So just saying.
Was that before
Very
or after
drunk.
he had the massive heart attack? I think that was before.
I
wasn't it?
don't know.
All the timeline is a jumbled mess.
Oh, it's brutal. I mean, it's easy to see how. I mean, Coppola, especially, obviously, The Godfather 3 got that recut as well.
Mhm.
He likes to go back to his work and just figure out what was going on in hindsight. Because Apocalypse Now is.
He was high as a kite as well, wasn't he?
Yes, he was also.
Oh, you can
This was
tell.
just like,
some
did I
consistency.
shoot this? Wow, there's some extra footage I never knew I made.
He just stumbles into the plantation scene. What's this? Oh my!
Oh, there's
Did
a
you put it
crashed
in?
Playboy helicopter. Yeah, sure, we can get 5 minutes out of that. Why not? I watched this with my mate, and he said, "Oh, it's a bit like Tropic Thunder." It's like, no, not quite.
Yeah, the guy's actually black.
Yeah. But I mean, consider it's kind of like it's one of those.
Jesus Christ!
It's one.
Like Tropic Thunder.
I'm just gonna power on through. It's like it is one of those.
That's Platoon.
Oh yeah. It's one of those perfect storm movies though, where it's right at the cusp of where the Vietnam War was starting to kind of slowly ebb out of American culture. It was still very prevalent. It was still very kind of, Forrest Gump would revitalize it about a decade later. But 79, the turn of the century into the 80s, into the sort of Reaganomics era.
I mean, it's still pretty fairly entrenched in, in the
'cause it was
culture. Like the people still
75
like
when
if
it
you,
pulled out.
yeah.
I mean, it came out the year after the Deer Hunter won.
Mm.
Infamously won.
It almost
the
feels like
Oscars.
it's kind of at the sort of the pinnacle of the discussion about Vietnam. As in, like the Americans pulled out of Vietnam, and then the movies started coming home.
It's the right time
Deer
to do it. I mean,
Hunter,
the only modern equivalent is kind of like lockdown movies, which are just so fast to come out and are so terrible. There's not one good lockdown movie.
No, you had things like after 9/11, you kind of had this sort of period of like, okay, well, just people started just like processing it through art, and then you had the movies about war in Iraq, like you had your Hurt Lockers and whatnot. And they just
World Trade Center.
But yeah, but then it takes a few years for these things to kind of just filter into the art or entertainment, or both, I suppose.
Predator is still the best Vietnam War movie, so it doesn't matter.
It's set in South America, but yeah.
Don't worry about it. It was originally written as a Vietnam War film.
I thought you were going to say Return of the Jedi. He works for the Viet Cong.
Oh,
that's symbolism right there.
That would have
so
been
is
Star Wars
so is
a lot more
Nixon
interesting.
Darth Vader then?
He's the Emperor.
No,
that's
I don't know who Darth Vader is in this.
Gerald
analogy.
Ford.
Kissinger.
Redeem yourself.
Does that make George McGovern Luke Skywalker? I don't know how that sets.
Possibly.
Anyways, yes, Apocalypse Now is pretty good. Yeah. It's probably in my top 20. Like, if I had to rank them, like, it is. I love it. I think it's amazing. It's
I love to see that full 20 now.
Oh, I mean, the first spot always changes, but for the time being, it's either Stop Making Sense or
Fear and Loathing.
No, I'm not. Fear and Loathing doesn't crack the top 50. I don't think.
You're not too big.
Scandalous for a Hunter S. Thompson fan.
I mean, the book's my favorite. I do love filth. Filth's in the top 20, yeah, for sure. Trainspotting 2. I like my filth.
Trainspotting 2, as in T2.
Sorry, Trainspot as in
as well.
see what we did there.
Cheeky.
I went through a period where I kept saying Trainspotting 2 was better than the first one, and then I got my head checked. But
Like after blunt force trauma from someone who actually
I
disagreed.
got pushed down a flight of stairs, yeah. But no, what do you think of Apocalypse Now? Because I've just assumed that we're all fans of it.
I don't know. I'm afraid of Jakub. Jakub's gonna be like, I don't like
horse.
this.
It's a 5-star film. What do you want? It's one of the most important films possibly to ever come out of Hollywood.
So it's not too bad then.
It's not too. No, it's like my gimmick was always that like in 1979, like people were just like, oh, like Apocalypse Now was robbed at the Oscars because Kramer versus Kramer won. I'm like, have you seen Kramer versus Kramer? It's amazing, but no, just this movie. Like I have it on my shelf and I can't watch it again because it broke my heart. But the way Dustin Hoffman looks at Meryl Streep at the end, it's just I can't. But anyway, it's a different film. It's a different
Not
problem,
based on a book, right? So we probably won't cover it.
I don't know, but I think it was based on a book. I don't know. I can't tell you. But
it's a novel, yeah, of course.
Like Apocalypse Now, it's like I don't know anyone who goes like, oh, it's terrible or it's mediocre. Like you watch this, and like you kind of appreciate the grandeur of it all, because it is, it is like a movie that like you'll never see a movie like this ever made again. That's just plain and simple. The late 70s was the time when you could actually accomplish stuff like this. Possibly maybe early 80s. I think Fitzcarraldo is probably another one that's probably just almost a film that will break a man, like
outside of the Hollywood system.
I suppose, yeah. But then like in within the Hollywood system, like this is kind of like a big brother to Sorcerer in many ways.
Yes.
Yeah. Like a movie that will just like you can see a filmmaker bit way more than he could chew, and he chewed it anyway. And he just like people were just like Francis, can you please spit it out? Like you're not gonna swallow it, and he's just like, no, totally gonna swallow it. And then he chokes.
Gonna wash it down.
And then he chokes. Someone just accomplishes the Heimlich maneuver. No, sorry. The sort of the abdominal thrust, because it's a patented procedure, so you can't say a Heimlich maneuver without having to pay Mr. Heimlich.
We're gonna get sued.
Yes, he will get sued.
It's like the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy. He owns the words "Let's Get Ready to Rumble." And
that's insane.
Do you want to
last time
remove it
somebody
from
said
the
it
podcast?
was several $1 million he successfully sued them for.
Yeah,
because they said, "Let's get ready to rumble."
This is informative. We'll be fine. Spreading wisdom.
So this falls under fair use clause, right? But what I will say is just like, I mean, when you were saying like this movie is not violent, have you watched this movie?
Yeah, no, it's not bad. It's all right.
It's not
that's
gory.
just every day in my town.
It is gory. It's just a lot of the violence. A lot of the violence is not active.
Yes,
I would say what you see is like these sort of the long tracking takes of just hellscape of these like heads on spikes, body parts on trees. You don't even, like, and at some point, I think halfway through the movie, I even stop recognizing them anymore. They just blend into the environment. Like there's the pink and the green, they just mesh together. The pink of the flesh. Just
like a branch is maybe just someone's torso.
Yeah, but like you have these like when the air cavalry just lands, and like Duvall kind of just goes in here and he just like with his cowboy sort of attitude of General Patton, I suppose. He just has this sort of like like everyone's crouching and he's standing up while mortar shells are flying, and then the camera just pans and you see like these body parts everywhere. There's this guy just full on Saving Private Ryan holding his own stomach in, suppose this is when it affects you, and then later on when they're just traveling down the river, and then Martin Sheen's losing his shit just a little bit every half a second, you stop acknowledging this anymore, and by the time you go into Kurtz's lair, which is strewn with blood and gore and guts, it's just paved with human bodies, you don't even compute Like you're just like, this is just a building.
Yeah, you're as desensitized as the
Yeah.
characters. Just
Which
lost touch with it.
yeah. So I suppose, like in terms of my general impressions on of the film, like you can't even go and say like anything other than it's amazing, and I'm really happy this movie exists, because you can't imagine this movie exists in the current climate. No one's going to spend this kind of money to allow one man to go and commandeer an army of people around him to actually put something like this together and fail at the box office at the same time, right? Because the world didn't care. I think maybe the world wasn't ready, because he really struck a nerve, I think, with his portrayal of Vietnam, because he didn't make a movie about Vietnam. He made a movie that was Vietnam, right?
Mhm.
And actually the production itself was an allegorical sort of like an ironic sort of take on, this is actually almost exactly a Vietnam, as a mission that's, you think you can just go on and then succeed, and you end up with your tail between your legs, and then possibly quite a few limbs sort of missing. So it's fascinating. It's a fascinating study on multiple levels, and then also as an adaptation of the Conrad's novel, because it kind of does really, I don't know, contextualize the idea of going to war just as a concept, as something horrific that people potentially at the time didn't really connect the dots for, or maybe they have a little bit forgotten that, they were only like 3 decades removed from another war to end
Mhm.
all wars that also was sort of peppered very generously with atrocities, right? So,
Yeah.
in like, long story short, TLDR, Apocalypse Now is amazing, 5 stars.
It's
Yeah.
just on the violence quickly. I think what I meant was sort of the impact and the outcome of the violent acts is more important than the actual act itself, where sort of the fallout of it is shown more than the actual. Like you mentioned, Saving Private Ryan, that's the perfect example. When you see people
Mm-hmm.
getting mowed down on the beaches, it's it's kind of a different picture to what you see in Apocalypse Now, where people are sort of they've already been gunned down. You're seeing them try and fucking pull their intestines back inside of themselves, or
Mm-hmm.
like heads on spikes. It's the same actions, but with such a strikingly different impact. It's amazing. It's bloody stunning.
In the beginning, you see there's this sort of raid, right? Like when
Yeah,
the
yeah,
helicopter guys, then they just try to land, and this woman just throws a grenade into the helicopter, and they just mow down the entire family. And then you kind of almost don't even notice, because it's just superseded with other things quickly.
yeah.
But then there's the violence ends up being removed, like when they just order an airstrike and they just like napalm the entire forest.
Jesus, yeah.
um, for reals, by the way.
All right.
Right?
It kind of
Jesus.
feels like how people actually experienced the war at home, though. You know, you had Walter Cronkite as a news anchor at the time, just sort of detailing it. You know, you would get details, you would get pictures. You would not actually get the smell of napalm. You would not get the sort of the horror of actually being up close and personal to it. You would always see it through another lens, and I feel
Mhm.
like that's really well done. It's like
Hmm.
you mentioned there, the sort of the gunning down of a family, and then just straight into a bit with Harrison Ford. It's mad.
But there are these little moments just on the violence as well. Like when they're operating on the guy. Now they have this guy who's wounded, right? And he's screaming and then you wonder why. And then they just cut open the leg of his of his of his trousers, right? And just the leg, they just casually remove a part of his leg
Mm.
just to put it to one side, and you realize, oh, the guy's leg has been amputated. And you almost, it kind of hits, I mean, it always hits me. This is an image I always remember from this film, just in general. But then again, you just cut to Harrison Ford, who's probably high as a kite as well, offering someone a cigarette, and you know that it's not a real cigarette, it's probably pot. But so it's like, but then again, it serves a purpose, because you see this sort of, it's perfectly juxtaposed, as in, like, here's this ultra violent piece of imagery of a young, probably 19-year-old boy losing his leg and potentially on his way to the grave, cut to generals in their little safe house discussing a mission over a glass of brandy, you know.
And some very fancy looking food,
And
which
some,
is not the
yes,
slog that all the others will be eating at that point.
yeah.
No, I completely agree. Like, Apocalypse Now is one of the best films ever made. I don't like to use the word objectively, but this is objectively great. In every facet, it took me
Is
one
it
minute.
iconic?
It is literally iconic in the actual sense of the word. It took me 1 minute on this rewatch to go, oh yeah, this I forgot, but this is incredible. Just when it opens with this montage
Just think, I need to
to
listen
the
to the doors
end.
again.
Oh, the doors are so good. Such an underrated. No, not underrated. I mean,
It's
but
not underrated. Like, come
we
on,
take
they're
them
not.
for granted. We take them for granted. So you don't see people talking about them like they do the Beatles and Rolling Stones. They're just a
Oh,
level below them in contemporary music
just
conversation.
thank
But
Jim Morrison for dying, right? Like if he kept if he stayed with us a little bit longer, I think he would be
it
in
could be with Paul
conversation.
McCartney right now, just singing on
Just
some stage.
on Live Aid or something.
Uh, but no,
Paul Simon.
it's an astonishing opening that just keeps on bringing the goods. I've still only watched the theatrical cut. I keep wanting to. I have the Redux DVD, and I've been meaning to watch the final cut for a long time. But every time I talk to people, even talking to you guys, I'm like, I want to watch the other cut. But then everyone's like, don't do it. Just it's. I've seen the extra content, but I've never seen it in context. Like I've never seen it as the one full movie. I've seen the plantation scene. I've seen all the other deleted scenes that were added back in. But there's just something so just perfectly paced about the theatrical cut that I love. And I'll watch the other versions soon enough, probably in 5 years. If that can be considered soon. Um, but it is haunting. It's a haunting film. Um, to call it a trip would be an understatement in its own way. There is so much beauty in the horror, in the violence present in this film that is outstanding. I think every single sequence in here has stuck with me since I first watched this movie. It keeps on being on sticking with me. I always think of that one interview with Quentin Tarantino, where he's talking about the Manson family scene when Brad Pitt goes to the ranch halfway through Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and he was like, "I'm doing my Apocalypse Now thing, where in every shot in the background you're gonna have a dog running." Just like there's a helicopter in every shot in the background of Apocalypse Now, and you're watching the first half of the movie, and yes, like just on a logistical level, this is hell. Like you cannot afford that many cameras. Like they were shooting some of these sequences for like it's almost like just a month for the raid, or something like that. With Ride of the Valkyries, the level of coordination, just in terms of pure logistics of directing and stuff, it's incredible. But the way that it's assembled together to create this emotional piece is beautiful and horrifying at the same time. Like we were talking about the violence of this film. The one moment that has stuck with me the most in the first half, um, you mentioned, I think maybe you, Jakub, there's the guy with his guts spilling out that is
Hmm.
a Viet Cong, and you have Robert Duvall coming. I'll give water to any man who's keeping his guts in with a pan. Come on! And just opened this bottle of water, just about to give a drink to this guy. I'm like, oh, you see this. I mean, it's not the best thing he could be doing to this man, other than actually saving him. But he's trying. But then as soon as he sees this famous surfer that's part of Charlie Sheen's group, he's like, "Oh, is that the surfer guy?" It just stands up and leaves. Like, complete. It shows how just hypocritical and actually inhuman he is towards this man. He's just putting on this facade of being the superior leader, but he actually just doesn't give a shit. Um,
I'm not
and
sure if he's hypocritical. I think he's
well, no,
just
the hypocritical is
switched
probably
off.
the wrong.
He's kind of like Marlowe, as in everyone in here is detached. They just don't care. Like
Yes.
they'll look at the violence in the background and look away and just see the waves, like how they split. They
Yeah.
could ride them side by side, and meanwhile in the background there are just people being mowed down. As in, like, this is a commentary, right? Like this.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's a hypocrite.
But
He's
hypocrite
just
was the wrong
he's
term. I agree.
desensitized, as in, like, he doesn't care, like, that he's participating in this brutal act um of violence, right?
And
That it
and
is war, right? Yeah.
and it's easy
Anyway.
to lose focus as well on what's happening, because that's the only way you can actually keep your sanity. That's the theme of insanity is prevalent throughout the entire film. And you know, the protagonist. I keep forgetting his name. Uh,
Willard.
Willard, that Martin Sheen plays. I
It's my
did they call him
username on
Charlie
Zencaster.
Sheen? Yeah. I should have. It's on the upper right corner. There you go. I keep forgetting it's actually written down. I always think it's just a small name on the bottom, but it's not. Um, but yes, that's his journey through his own personal hell. It also mirrors the actual hell of Vietnam War and all of that. He's not a likable protagonist. I think we discussed that with the Marlowe from Heart of Darkness, but it's even more clear that you can kind of sympathize with him, but you don't necessarily justify any of his actions, especially when he becomes really brutal and cold with regards to just the Vietnamese people that they encounter. There's this one scene where they actually stop a boat just to do a routine check, and he says, "No, don't stop, don't stop. We're on a mission. Just don't do the routine check." And the boat leader says, "No, we're stopping. We have to do this." And it all ends into a massacre, and there's a wounded woman, and he just shoots her. He's like, "We cannot afford to lose any more time. We're just going." He
Well,
commits
she's
an act of violence, and she and just and we
in
move
all
on.
fairness, he puts her out of her misery. She wouldn't have survived after like having like 6 machine gun bullets in her back. I mean, they're
Uh,
just like, oh, she's still breathing. We have to like, we have to go
That's
and take care of her.
protocol. That's
That's
protocol.
protocol. Take her because she's breathing. You have to just okay. We'll treat her. We give her medical help. But then he goes like, she ain't gonna survive. Boom, boom, done. Because he's dehumanized. He's desensitized again. But it's not
And
necessarily a comment
also,
on the character. It's just on the like he almost on the practicality of his mission, right?
you don't have proof. You don't have anyone who could actually say what happened on that boat, which was fairly illegal. And
I
there's
mean,
this
he knows
beautiful.
that. He says this like we should. I told you shouldn't have stopped.
Yeah. No, of course, of course. But there is this documentary that I do recommend checking out. It's called Winter Soldier. I think it might actually be on Internet Archive from the
Not the Marvel film,
1970s.
right?
It's not the Marvel film. It's an actual documentary, and it's
Documentary.
harrowing. Well, that's you know what
Chris Evans is really good in that one. Yeah.
Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier. No,
Robert Redford's in that one, isn't
he
It's a
is.
documentary.
he?
Um, no, there is a documentary from 1970. I don't remember the actual year, but it is basically just actual veterans from the Vietnam War talking about what they experienced, and
Mhm.
there are some stories in there that are just horrifying. There's no real archival footage, if I remember correctly. It's just people talking at this public hearing, you could say, where they're saying everything that they witnessed. And there's some things, and I remember this story especially. They talk about that. I was thinking while watching this film, and especially during that scene that I mentioned, where they would get on helicopters and they would write in, like, we're carrying 10 prisoners. And
Mhm.
during the flight, they would just, lose some of them midway through the air. Just it happens. And no one would bat an eye. It was just, oh, there's 7 people now in this helicopter. There were 12 on departure. What happened? No one's asking questions. No one's, you're actually going to change the original writing. And it was always 7 people, what's
Mhm.
the matter? There's no proof of that. And you're seeing, and that's what I was thinking about, like watching Apocalypse Now, and I find it interesting that you go from one year to the other. You have The Deer Hunter, which wins a lot of Oscars, and it's a critical darling. Michael Cimino, amazing, blah blah blah. And then you get to Apocalypse Now, and it hits people in a different way that's more uncomfortable. And I was thinking about that, and in a way, The Deer Hunter, and a friend of mine talked about this, and I didn't really get it back then, but now I get it. It doesn't necessarily glorify war, but visually, is still
What, Deer
painting.
Hunter?
The Deer Hunter, it's not glorifying war,
No,
but there are the
the
way that
opposite.
it's shot. There's like the attack like halfway through when they actually get to Vietnam. Uh, there are a lot of cool hero shots of Robert De Niro, just is coming in a halo of light, his slow motion shooting. And while it is still a movie that is criticizing especially the psychological effect of war,
Mhm.
there is no denying it does kind of dehumanize some of the Vietnamese with the Russian roulette and all of that. I love the movie to bits. I think it's incredible, but the way that Apocalypse Now portrays them, which is, as people like, I think the shot prior to the Ride of the Valkyries kicking in, we're just seeing this village. It's a normal village. There's kids going at school. Everything's peaceful and quiet. There are people living, and they get annihilated by these men who are taking joy in setting fear in them. That's something that the Nazis would do with the airplanes. They would make the loud noises just to scare people of their arrival. Like,
Hmm.
it's sadistic. I think, people have connected it to Wagner as well. Wagner and fascism and blah blah blah. So there's some correlation there. I don't know how intentional it was in Coppola's part, but
It's a
I'm
grandiose. That's
it's
why.
it's grandiose. It's operatic, literally, and even the
Hmm.
way it's shot, it's so beautiful. It's so clean. You mentioned, Ewan, the Omaha Beach sequence from Saving Private Ryan. That's gritty. That's handheld. It's all up close. People are screaming. Explosion. Oh shit! It's loud.
No music.
No music. No music. This one is the opposite, and it is purposeful. I think they could have afforded to make it um more vibrant, we could say, more kinetic, if they wanted, but they didn't, and that was by design, and it does play into it. I completely agree with actually what you were saying, Jakub. Even rewatching it now in retrospect, it's like, oh shit, yes, the final part when you're actually seeing the temple and and the heads on sticks and all of the awful acts that Kurtz has committed, you don't feel them.
Like it almost feels like it's that's just like, so what's new? They've been
Yes,
like I've been
yes.
watching this for 2.5 hours now. So is he really that scary? Like that different? Like I don't see the difference, and that's the point.
That's the point. I think
Yeah,
that this is the genius of everything that happens in the last half an hour, which is not loud, it's not action, it's slightly psychedelic, it's primarily dialogue driven. There's a lot of thick, just oppressive mood and atmosphere at this camp, at this tribe that Kurtz has managed to get under his control through sheer charisma. And once I actually see Marlon Brando, like, I mean, bless him, the man came on set overweight, not
shaved
knowing
his
his
head.
line as always, shaved his head like as a lunatic, but he pulls it off. it's that's
This
the
close
genius.
to wearing a muumuu, right? Like
It's
on the set of Island of Doctor
it's
Moreau.
the bit in Heart of
It's
Darkness, the
one, yeah, it's
documentary,
just one line detached.
when he's halfway through a line and he just stops and goes, "I ate a fly," and he just walks off. It's like, yeah, fantastic. He's really pulling it all together. It's, I mean, it's again. I mean, another scene from Heart of Darkness that really stuck with me was when Coppola is going off the rails about how bad Brando is, and he's like, "I don't care. I'll get Nicholson. I'll get Hoffman. I'll get anyone to do this. For the love of God, just settle into it." And it is a remarkable performance. I feel like it's obviously overshadowed because of the work they did together on The Godfather, but it really is just a stunning little supporting role that really ties everything together. Um, Again, it's, I hate saying it's like, oh, you can't see anybody else doing that.
I can.
Maybe Mark Strong. Mark Strong could probably do it.
No,
Martin Strong or Mark Strong.
Oh, Mark Strong, the guy from
Mark,
Kingsman.
Mark
Nicholson would kill it.
I feel like
Like,
Nicholson
like I
plays.
think Coppola like, Pacino could kill it.
but it's
Nicholson plays
different.
Nicholson.
Well,
It's like
of course it would be different. But you like
Statement of the
in a
century.
world in a
I want
world
get
where
Mel Gibson to do
Brandon
it.
doesn't do this role and Pacino or De Niro does it, you wouldn't really say like, "Oh, I wish Brando did it." You're like, no, you'd be just like,
Well, no,
you'd be
because I
saying the same
mean,
like, De Niro really pulled it off,"
in hindsight, Brando did Island of Dr. Moreau, so we've got that to rely on for jungle-based antics for that man. By all accounts, not a very good film, but it does have David Thewlis. So.
Just stay away from Island of Dr. Moreau. Okay.
That's another Death by Adaptation we're gonna do. Fantastic. Get the
Can I
H.G.
be
Wells
honest? Can
train.
I be honest? Are we? Yeah.
We can do the entire series of adaptations of Dangerous Game.
Yeah. Dear me.
No, it's not Dangerous Game. What's the actual name of the book? Why did I say Dangerous Game?
What, the Island of Dr. Moreau?
Yes.
It's called the Island of
That's
Dr. Moreau.
that's the book
Yeah.
No, what's it?
by Herbert George Wells.
H.G.
What's
Mr.
one of the?
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Wells.
I don't know
Mr.
why
Wells.
I was confusing it with the most dangerous game. I don't know why.
Oh, right, okay.
There's the Island of Lost Souls. That's the early adaptation. So
Yes, yes.
I mix things up. Anyway, sorry. Continue, Ewan.
Oh, I'd finished what I was saying.
Uh, I
To
just
be
wanted to
honest,
kind
I don't remember what I was
of
saying.
just gonna just quickly add on the sort of like idea of like how this movie hit. Like there's
Yeah.
I think there's an important sort of point to kind of just potentially add to the pot is like there's this sort of I mean historically and like throughout the history of the human race, war has always been seen as as a sort of this extreme of the human condition, right? Like there's this
Hmm.
sort of um this this sort of the I don't know, this primitive dance that brings out the best and the worst out of humanity at the same time. Because during times of extreme violence, you'll see people, you'll see some people actually just work up the courage to do things that you'd never expect them to do, like put their life on the line, save other people, you know, also sort of remarkable things. And you can see like in like the Deer Hunter, you can see these like the halo effect. This kind of shines through because these people will be just like, I'm here on the ground, I'm here in the bushes, and I'm going to risk my life for my buddy to the right of me. That's the war bringing the best out of humanity
Yeah.
because you're putting your own life on the line to save the buddy next to you, right, in the trenches. However, the worst part of it is like, as you do so, you're also attempting to kill the enemy. So, so who's also a human being, who also has a family, who also has a wife, maybe has a kid, and you'll be orphaning a child, maybe if you're successful in your mission, right? Now, in like you could see, like this is why I suppose like war has always been romanticized to an extent that like maybe until like World War One came around, like no one romanticizes World War One or World War Two. Like this is not well, unless you're John Wayne, uh, who's never served, by the way. But um, but but in 1979, Coppola makes a movie that kind of just almost willfully and knowingly um, omits the idea of bravery, courage, that bring the sort of the part of the bring the best out of humanity. That he focuses squarely on the darkness of the human soul
Mhm.
that that accompanies this sort of idea of going to war, and then it's impossible for people to swallow and process. I suppose this is maybe why people were just like, oh, I can't deal with this, but it's true. And I feel like this is kind of what it is, and especially that the message that the movie is trying to advance, and well, I suppose transplants it from the book,
Yeah.
that it's so difficult to read that no one gives a shit, even though it's the best written novel of the 20th century or 19th century or whatever. But 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 then like he actually goes and asks the same question: why are we doing this? What is wrong with us as a species? Because it's pointless, it's senseless. Look at this, like we're totally devoid of humanity if we do this, because we can just mutilate a bunch of people, talk about surfing, and then establish an outpost somewhere in the middle of nowhere and actively dismember the local populace while assembling a show with playable playmates. Okay, and then and it looks like it's just, I suppose this is what they do.
Yeah.
They don't care. Like it doesn't. No one actually thinks like, do you guys think this is inappropriate? No, it's fine. Because we like, no one gives a shit, because we're like, oh, it's almost like we're not people here. They're not people, we're not people, we're just monsters. It's like the
Animals,
Nietzsche.
actual animals.
Yeah. Well, animals are better than this.
Probably.
Like, animals don't do things like this to each other. Not at least most. I know many animals don't do things like this to each other. Humans are kind of special in that regard, I suppose. But
It's a brutal film. It's brutal in retrospect. Like it. Yeah. No, I'm kind of at a loss. Even when I was writing, when I was watching, I watched this movie the first time in preparation for a thesis that I was writing for university. It was my closing project for my bachelor's, and it was all about the portrayal of war in cinema. Um, and watching this after watching some of the more pro Vietnam movies, like John Wayne's, I don't even remember the name of that
Or Green
bullshit.
Berets? Is it Green
Yes, the
Berets?
Green Berets, where the sun sets on the wrong side of Vietnam. It's amazing. No, it's it's so interesting to see how well this movie has aged as well. Um, Compared to so many other war films that, for better or worse, have aged poorly. They feel more stagey. They feel more. I don't know. They feel less real. And one of the fascinating things about these films is that it's not realistic at all. Like it's incredibly stylized right from the opening. It's not even
Hmm.
trying to be a gritty, raw, real portrayal of the war as it was.
It's very
Um,
dreamy.
it's so dreamy. I love
Oneric, that's
I
the word,
love
right?
I love that. I love those things. I love my
Yeah,
my my,
I
my
know you
dreamy
do.
dreamy mood. Yeah. Um and I I don't even know if there's another war film that's ever reached this level, even especially considering the source material.
Haven't
Um
seen it. Come and see.
Yeah,
Would that
yeah,
be
yeah.
close?
yeah.
But I have like it's on my watch list of like something I
Oh, you
really
haven't
wanted
seen
to
it,
watch.
sorry.
No, I haven't seen
Oh,
it, so I'm just
Jesus.
just from secondhand knowledge of like this being a very sort of realistic and really damning portrayal of war. Would that come close?
Yeah,
Ooh,
I think so.
let's say so, yeah, for the time
Uh,
being, yes.
if you want kind of like, definitely not to the same success as Apocalypse Now has had, but the two that have always stuck with me, the Steel Helmet and Ivan's Childhood, which
Mm-hmm.
are
Oh,
really brutal. The first Tarkovsky, is it
Evan's
Tarkovsky? Yeah,
childhood, yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
first
What's the
Tarkovsky movie,
what's the other one?
the Steel Helmet,
The
um,
steel helmet.
about the Korean War in America. Well, not obviously not in America. The Korean War wasn't in America. I mean, the warfare in Korea. Fucking
Samuel
hell.
Fuller. Look at that.
I've
Yeah,
never
that's the
seen
one.
this film.
Goes on the
Stunner.
watch
Really, really
list.
fun. Well, not fun, but like, a very articulate representation of a war that hasn't exactly made it to the big screen. Both of those really stuck with me for their portrayal, which is on a similar tone to Apocalypse Now, where it understands that warfare is a really grim and disgusting part of life. But it's very human. It's very introspective, and it's very torturous. And Come and See always falls into that. I mean, it's been a while since I've watched Come and See, but that always falls into that sort of pool where it's been that highly regarded, and rightly so, because that is a brutal film, really, really
Mm-hmm.
brutal.
Unlike the
Well, I love
Holocaust,
women's, yeah.
unlike the Holocaust sort of front of this, I would say like like there's your Schindler's List. That's kind of like here's the well-known portrayal of this that's kind of just trying to get things right, or like the pianist that kind of just tries to
Hmm.
get things right. And there's something like Son of Saul,
Yeah,
Hmm?
which is kind of like the Apocalypse Now sort of not like it has the sort of treatment of this isn't taking place in any sort of like tangible reality, like this takes place in hell, right?
Yes.
Like it's just like it just inhabits your headspace in a different way. Like it doesn't really connect with you logically or academically. It connects with your emotions much stronger than something like the pianist or Schindler's List does. So I think as opposed to like Apocalypse Now does this to you, as opposed to something like Platoon or the Deer Hunter. Which, by the way, the Deer Hunter is just. I mean, I know certain things are on purpose in here, but I really wasn't prepared for sitting through a Russian wedding for an hour and a half. in there. I know it. I know the purpose of it, but Jesus Christ,
He
Chimino is just a guy who really loves himself. It's just,
needed a leash, just someone to restrain him and stop it. We're going
just
back on set. No, we're not.
he
We're
needed
moving to another part.
he needed like a Thelma was it Schoonmaker? It's like some editor to go and like we can totally just cut this out. It's 45 minutes. I know.
She
I
just
know,
loses
Mike.
the masters. Well, I guess we're not putting that in.
Like one reel got just misplaced.
Even then, that's something that I do actually really like about Apocalypse Now. Even taking what you just said about Deer Hunter, for people who don't know or listening, there is like it is a film about the Vietnam War. It's over 3 hours long, I believe, or just three
Oh yeah,
hours
just I
long.
think
It's
just about smack on 3 hours and probably some
yeah.
change, but yeah.
The first hour is just about a group of
It's-
men at home going to celebrate a wedding. That's the first hour of the movie. Then you have this little less than the second hour is set during the actual Vietnam War, and everything else is the aftermath. How it psychologically scars these soldiers. And what I like about Apocalypse Now is that you don't spend any time, well, almost no time, on backstories for this man because it doesn't really matter. When you become a soldier, you're a blank slate.
You're a number.
You're a number. You're a number. You truly are. You truly are. Unless
Yeah.
you're the world famous surfer dude. You see like some of the letters that the men receive, which even then it's kind of
Still, what's his name? You don't know. Like the only man you know is Kurtz, really.
yes. It's
Like
the
even
only
like
name
you were
with it's the
like you
only
admitted
man with an
yourself.
identity in a way as
Like
well.
you admitted yourself. Like Martin Sheen's character was just like, what's his name? Exactly. No one gives it to us, right? He's just the guy who on whose shoulder you're just
Yeah,
on. But like you don't know anybody else. Like they don't matter. The only guy that matters really is Kurtz, and then
yeah.
and it's only because he's touted as something special, and you see him, and it's just like this is what I've been waiting for this whole time. Is this the god I'm supposed to take down? Are you an assassin? Like he's, and he just and he lies to him like no.
But he understands the allure of him. I think all of the build up to the sequences with Kurtz are so powerful. Even rewatching it now, it helps that you also have Dennis Hopper coked up beyond belief as a Virgil
He's
type of
very
guy.
twitchy. Come in, man. He
Yeah,
just
he just
I
doesn't
just
do that. If
and he
he
just
asks
like
for a picture,
Brando tells him to shut up, and he still just shuts up for like 3 seconds, and he goes like, "So yeah, man."
that's when that is one of the best instances of onset tension, just translating beautifully
Do you think
on
he
screen.
wasn't in character? He was just telling Dennis Hopper to shut up,
Probably was. You can feel he's very upset and very
and
tired.
Coppola is just like, "Keep rolling, like we're keeping this."
It's very natural now. Finally, yeah,
Like
but
I'm happy for Dennis Hopper that he kept his dick in his pants, and because it was a challenge for him in the 70s.
at least in what we see, maybe there's more deleted footage that's never seen the light of day. Um, but yes, is there any scene, like if you were to take one moment from this movie that kind of encapsulates what you like about it, especially considering Heart of Darkness, where you
Hmm.
would go like, this is why. Because I mean, the final question doesn't even really matter in this case because we all know which one we prefer. No one's gonna pick Art of Darkness. But if there was one scene from the film where it makes you go, you see, there's something kind of like this in Heart of Darkness, but this is why Apocalypse Now just works on a deeper level, at least for you personally. Jakub, why don't you
Oh,
go first?
I
Putting you on
mean,
the spot.
just in general terms, the reason it works is because it kind of spells it out visually, right?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
in general, and then also spells it out a little bit more concretely in certain ways. Like, well, I mean, I suppose this kind of just reverberates with they will bomb they will bomb these people and throw napalm on villages, but they won't write fuck on the bomb because it will be obscene. Which is okay. Like, but in terms of moments, I think there's like in like how it connects to the book, or how like my favorite moments, because I have a favorite moment of the film is when you see Coppola going like, "Look the other way for the
Yes.
TV." It's brilliant, by the way.
That was the
Uh,
cover for my thesis. I was like, just the picture of him just going, yeah, go, go.
but it's thematically appropriate as well because
Hmm?
there's a TV camera present, and they also have to sell it to the public.
Manipulation of reality.
They manipulate the reality by telling soldiers how to look when they're fighting, right? It's nuts. But just in terms of, there's a few moments in the film that kind of just, I suppose they just encapsulate the spirit of the book, and then I suppose the idea of what this film's trying to do. One of them would be the massacre on the boat. That's
Hmm.
really powerful. That's a powerful moment. Actually, that's a powerful moment for the characters, and like how, 'cause as he's drifting into insanity himself, and he's actually actively making a change, because otherwise they're just observing. All he does is observe, and this is the only time he actually makes something does something by himself, apart from killing Kurtz. Spoiler for Apocalypse Now.
Oh no.
Um, uh, another one that really struck me was the long take when you see the air cavalry drop in, Robert Duvall just inspecting the field, and all these
Mm.
people just moaning and wailing in the background as he's just casually just diverts his focus towards waves. And they're making a point, and it's all just filmed so, just choreographed so perfectly, because there's this massive set all around them, and there's these explosions everywhere, and you can imagine Coppola just like in the background going like Billy Friedkin, just I want more explosions now. Just it's just, you could see
Duval
the,
just keeping it cool.
yeah, but the grandeur of this is actually just beautifully underpinned uh, in there, and also is just selling you this message that this is all for naught, because these people are not, like, there's no cause to this war. This
Mm.
war is evil, just because there's I think the, all that matters when you go to war is the reasons to go to war. If you go to war to defend your country or to defend your homeland, you're excused. You have to defend your family, I suppose, right? But this, like, you can see that the Vietnam War was a war of conquest, and the war of brutal conquest, kind of symmetrical to the war of brutal conquest that the Belgians unleashed upon the native population of the Congo, right? So that's why I suppose people really could not possibly stomach it, even though they may have not even realized that at the time. So that's kind of like the air cavalry just sells it to me like this, and it's already smack in the beginning of the film, right?
It's crazy. Crazy. Beautifully put, man. Beautifully put. How about you, Ewan?
There's always one scene that sticks out for me, and I guess it's kind of the whole point of it, is when he's killed Kurtz and he walks out and he sees everybody bow to him and he's got the machete in his hand. And he's about to step on the board. It's like, oh, actually, I could be the next. You know, it's
I could do
The
this.
new
I
god.
could do this. I could be the new kind of mad with power thing. It's all about power at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all about who holds the most power in this environment or that environment. The consequences don't matter as long as the power still remains, and it really does. It's such a chilling scene. I love it. It's really really good because it articulates everything that the book tries to do, as well as what Coppola had in mind. Where it's there weren't stories of a similar variety in the actual Vietnam War, but there were rebellions against officers. There was stuff like troops would kill the commanding officer because they lost all faith. There is a loss of faith right at the core of Apocalypse Now
Mhm.
that rings so true to the time period that Coppola wants to adapt. He's reflecting on actually the Vietnam War was a savage and brutal war, but
Mhm.
not for the right reasons. Not for the reasons that you would usually associate with warfare. It was more because everybody kind of went a bit feral, um, haunting stuff. But that scene for me is just perfect. It ties everything together so nicely. Um, of course, the other honourable mention would be that dinner with the French in that one edition of the movie, which I can't remember which one it is, but I
It's the
remember.
Redux. And I think it's in the final cut, maybe, trimmed down.
Yeah, I remember watching it and thinking, I don't hate this, but it doesn't really make sense. Like I get what he's going for,
Hmm.
like where it's a flashback in time when the French were still involved, but yeah, it doesn't really work. But the final scene where it's like, you know, Martin Sheen wandering around with a machete, going, "Hang on a second, I could be king." It's really beautiful because I feel like it's a very human sort of worry, where it's like, "Oh, I've conquered the beast. I can now sort of step into its place." It's wonderful.
It's Nietzsche for you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh yeah.
Just saying.
Just
Just
there for the taking. It's so
just
close.
those who go out to slay monsters should be wary not to become one, right?
Don't look into the abyss, etc. etc.
Exactly.
He was onto something. He was onto something. Nice. My choice. Like there's so many great scenes in here. And even how they mirror. moments from the book. But for me, probably has to be, especially reading the book and watching the movie so closely to one another. It is the aftermath of the air raid on the village.
Mm.
You're just going through the massacre, and there's no feelings, there's no emotion. Like these aren't people. These are just lifeless bodies that are ready to be discarded and move on to another village to destroy and enjoy the waves. And it does kind of mirror, just the torture and the inhumanity shown to the Africans in Heart of Darkness. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, yeah, even what we were talking about earlier and what you were talking about, Jakub, of the racism of Heart of Darkness. Like, no one would say Francis Ford Coppola hates Vietnamese after watching the movie. Like, I hope not, at least, because of how they are portrayed, quote unquote. Because it's just that's how it was seen. That's how the characters see them. They're not people for them, and that's probably the most interesting parallel that I found rewatching the movie with the book. And kind of why I found it more powerful in a sense, because of the visual element, because of the man trying to hold his guts in, because of the slaughtered family that's just dispatched in an instant. Like, there's none of the action scenes outside of the actual, well, there's no action scenes, actually. That's the point. Like, there's no cool choreography of things coming. It's like, no, it's just chaos and things blowing up and people screaming, and it's over quicker than you think, than you imagine. Brutal. We've also a worthy mention to the boat scene. That whole massacre is just, you know I think there was another movie that I saw. I rewatching the scene, I thought this was that movie where they actually had weapons on the boat or something like that. I don't remember
Isn't
which
this
movie
like
this
Rambo
is.
4 or something like this?
I was thinking maybe, you
Could
know,
be.
just
But
like,
then it's
no,
over a
there's nothing on
puppy
the
as well.
boat, and it's over a puppy, the cutest darn puppy. They
They
just
take
yanked
the
that.
puppy as well.
Yeah, they just yank him around. It's just poor puppy. Animals were harmed in the making of this. There's a cow that has a horrible end during the climax of the movie when Kurtz is killed.
But this is
Uh,
production value because I think apparently they were just about to sacrifice the ox anyway, so they just filmed it.
it's like the chicken in Pink Flamingos. Was going to be eaten anyway, so might
No, it's
as well
just when
be.
like it's not like Coppola goes like, "Can we kill a cow and film it?" Like, no, just I think the locals were this was ritual for them, so they just filmed it and incorporated it, juxtaposed it
To
again. It's
another
like
ritual.
to another ritual sort of killing, right? But then it's kind of like the ending of The Godfather. It's just like, like this sort of the I renounce the devil, It's
Just Coppola knows how to make a good montage, man.
I know, right?
Like all of his, every at least I want to say maybe every one of his movies has. No, not every one of his movies, but a few of his movies have great montages in them. There are some not so great. I don't think Jack has any standout montage. in
No,
it.
but I will say this: like he's one of the few directors, possibly maybe Hitchcock is the other one that I could possibly say who has a string of 4 undisputed masterpieces under his belt. Like he
In
has
a,
The
in a
God.
in a in a let's say objective way, yes.
Yeah, as in like films that are just well, just widely considered
Hmm.
indispensable to the culture, right? So like your the Godfather Conversation, Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now, all in the span of 8 to 9 years, right? And then you have like for me, Hitchcock is another one because you have North by Northwest, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds, I suppose, right?
The 50s run, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but then I can't think of many more like this. I mean, people were just Christopher Nolan. Just sit down.
Shh, we don't say that name here.
You're gonna wake Jack.
Amazing. No, I'm so happy we did this. I've been meaning to rewatch Apocalypse Now for a while. I wanted to watch the final cut, but again, that's for another time. It's fine. It's
Next
fine.
podcast.
It's a redux of this episode. We're just gonna reread Heart of Darkness again, um, and then just watch Apocalypse Now. I don't know. Anyway, this is it for this episode of the Death by Adaptation podcast. It's time to roll out the red carpet for you guys. Jakub, where can our listeners find you on the web?
Oh, I'm gonna do a proper plug this time because I never do this right. So you can find me personally at Talk About Film Twitter,
Yes.
Jakub Flasz on Letterboxd. You can find my writings on flashonfilm.com, and
Yes.
then occasionally on Clapper as well, where I've written a few reviews recently. Also, you can listen to the show I run together with Randy and Nicolò as well. Although Nicolò, you've been just like, I don't know what's happened, but anyway.
I'm so tired at night. It's like 11:20 p.m.
It's-
and it's a miracle that I'm still awake.
yeah. So it's mostly now Randy and me just talking about stuff. So I don't know when is this coming out? In
It's actually
what?
coming out when I'll probably have, I'll have been back. It's coming out at the end of no, it's coming out in 2 weeks' time. What am I talking about?
Oh, so okay.
On the 9th of April, if all goes well.
All right.
So I'll
So
be away, so hopefully everything's published
okay, so you can
successfully.
tune into the show I run, which is Uncut Gems Podcast at Uncut Gems Pod everywhere, where we talk about movies nobody else gives a toss about. And then just about recently, we've completed our mini run of Brandon Lee movies, which we finished with The Crow, and now we're going through 90s superheroes because why not, right? So you can go and listen to that, and if you really like what we're doing and like our voices and whatever, you can also support us on Patreon because we have to pay for these Zencaster fees.
We love you, Zencaster.
But then over on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/uncutgemspod, you can go and listen to the conversations about movies that are a little bit more, let's just say, well known. And then we have all sorts of marathons. Like we've completed last year a full-on complete filmography of David Lynch, which is there for the taking. Bonus tie-ins, mini retrospectives, and this year we're going through Steven Soderbergh on our show. So on the main show, we're going through his sort of deeper cuts, and on the Patreon, we're just going through the Traffics and Oceans 11s of the world, and then also we're going through John Cassavetes one by one. So we've just about like as of recording last night, we've recorded a conversation about A Child Is Waiting, and that was a conversation that I have. So so there's plenty of stuff to listen to if you're into that kind of stuff, and if you don't mind listening to me ramble, because I do ramble. So Uncut Gems Pod everywhere on social media, or uncutgemspodcast.com is our website where you can find all the links. So there's that, and flashonfilm.com, don't forget. You can read my writings in there. That's me.
Mega Gems Patreon is the definition of bank for your buck. So
It's
absolutely,
$3.
that's almost $1 an episode a month, and you have over a year of content already present. So, that's a bargain. That's a good
Yeah.
bargain right there.
It's like 50 podcasts already in there. So I don't believe in overcharging the public, because for me this is all about supporting and just making sure that at least we can pay the bills, and just if this show pays for itself, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So just about was paying for itself before Zencaster came along and said like, no, you can't do this for free anymore.
Gotta have the ante now.
But yeah, go and support us if you can, because it helps, and then there's plenty of conversations about cool movies. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah. How about you, Ewan? Where can they find you online to read your writing, to hear your talking?
The usual places. You can get me on Twitter, where at the time of recording I am verified, but at the time of publication I won't be, because that tech bastard Musk has stripped me of my crown.
Hey, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Can't kill my legacy. And you can find that legacy on Twitter at Ewan Gleadow, EWANGLEADOW, same for Letterboxd. You get me on Rate Your Music and Goodreads as well, I guess. I tend not to check the comments on there because I get a slate of nasty comments.
Goodreads or Radio Music?
All
Or
of them.
both.
Do you get hate mail on Goodreads? Like, this is an achievement.
I get hate mail every day now. It's
Put it on your
delightful.
bio. The most hated man this side of the internet.
Just had a comment through. Oh dear, you really don't like Noel Gallagher? Hefty dollops of condescending bitterness. Bravo.
That's what you get for just being in music criticism.
Yeah, well,
this is a toxic crowd. I thought the gaming criticism was rough and film, but Jesus.
But yes, if you want to level me a comment and add to my ad revenue, you can go to cultfollowing.com. And I also do work for Daily Star because man's got to eat. Daily Mirror, Clapper, Death by Adaptation, obviously, which is
Yay.
where I am currently. And my podcast as well, Don't Listen to This, which is currently on hiatus because I'm very, very tired and I just got done with a 2-week trip around the country. I can safely say that most of it is pretty shit. So that's the UK toured and charted. The rest of my stuff just goes out whenever. Currently reviewing Depeche Mode, Noel Gallagher, Pink Floyd, Bob Dylan, Bono, and Lana Del Rey, which, as you can probably tell,
New
is
album out.
for who? For all of them. Yes, and Depeche Mode has the best of all of them, which is, to be fair, not a surprise. But yeah, you can get me on all those places, and I forgot I have a Patreon, which, to be honest, is pretty useless to me because I don't publish anything on there and haven't since July. But if
Aw.
you would like to pay,
As
for
long
me,
as they're paying.
yeah, just give me money. That's what I'm here for. Jakub very nobly said he's here for the arts. I'm here for the cash. I feel like there should be two sides to every coin, as long as that coin is going in my pocket.
Well,
But I'm sure I'll be back for another lovely rendition of Death by Adaptation as just an everyday, non-verified man.
Yeah.
You can't see it, but I'm fucking seething.
why would
No, I
you
really
be?
don't.
Why would you be? Like, honestly.
Yeah, honestly,
I know people kind of just attach their personalities to this blue checkmark, but who gives a toss?
because when I go on dates, I can't say, "Oh, did you know I'm verified on Twitter?" No, like genuinely, Twitter, the whole verified thing on Twitter has done absolutely nothing for increasing view counts on anything I've done.
There
Nothing.
you go.
Yeah, it's useless. It is completely useless. Practically, completely
It's a
useless.
wank fest, is what it is.
awful.
Look at me, I'm verified. Or it's like the RT sort of like when people kind of put their tomato in their bio and just like somehow just elevates their status. No, it doesn't.
Yes, and some people put it in even if they aren't verified.
Just put a pepper, like a bell pepper, and then
Put
I'll
a bell
do it.
pepper on, yeah.
a cauliflower.
An aubergine.
It's uncanny. I got duped. Amazing. Meanwhile, you can follow me
Oh,
on
have we lost
Twitter.
Am I gone? Hello?
You're back. You're back.
He's
you're
gone.
back.
Okay, good.
I started to go in, and you were like, "Oh, I've lost." Just froze for a second.
Okay, no, I'm back, right? Okay, good.
Yes, I'm writing down the time stamp so I can fix it in post.
Sorry.
No worries. It happens. At least it's at the end. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at NickGra97, and there you can find links to everything, including my short films and videos on YouTube and Vimeo, my writing for Clapper, my gaming writing for Cold Following now, and also, of course, you can follow this podcast, Death by Adaptation, on Instagram and Twitter, respectively. Death by Adaptation Pod and Death Adaptation. Stay tuned, because right now we're taking, an extra week of break in between because I'm going away for a film shoot, and I'll be back soon. It's Easter as well. We all deserve a nice little break now. We'll be back to talk about The Friends of Eddie Coyle and Cogan's Trade, aka Killing Them Softly. A nice George Higgins double feature. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you have a fantabulous day. Bye bye.
The horror.